Hi, I'm Valerie Englehart, and in this video I am doing number 4 of 6 mini paintings that I want to submit to a gallery art show. And in this one, I want to paint a duck feeding in a pond where its little bottom is sticking in the air. So, just like with the water lily video that I did a couple weeks back, I am going with green water. And I'm using a fairly similar palette, but different. So last time I used Daniel Smith Undersea Green and some Winsor & Newton Perylene Green. This time I just decided to work from my palette, which mostly has Rockwell art paints. And the ones I am using are Rockwell Art, On It Diamond Yellow, which is the light green, and I think I pulled out Cleopatra Green, but it could be Limu Green Brown. The thing is, the actual colors themselves don't matter so much to me as long as they play nicely together and I get the values I want. And so I needed a mid-tone and a really dark tone. Now eventually I will get to the feet of this duck, which are orange, so this painting is done with just 3 colors. The orange is going to be Daniel Smith Aussie Red Gold, my favorite orange. So let's get started. I don't use a sketch when I paint, so I just go in. I've got my block of hot press 4x6 paper up at quite an angle because it's a pond scene. I want a lot of dripping to happen. And even though the duck is white, white things are rarely stark, pure white of the paper. They reflect what's around it. So I left a space for my duck, but have allowed a light tinting of the surrounding colors to go in to give it a more natural white color. Now, I don't know if you can see, but in some places, one reason I love the Rockwell art paints is how they are granulating and they split. And so as more water is added, as they drip and dry, they can separate into having other colors, and that green has these like blue undertones, but kind of an earthy blue. I don't know, it just works really well for me. It's funny how, like, for a pond, like, green is the way to go. Pulled out a little spritzer bottle because I want to get more movement and I want everything to fade away towards the bottom of the paper. I don't want to paint this from end to end with all of that detail. Part of my style is to leave some to the imagination, so that's what I want the bottom to be. And that's just a quick color study to show that I tried doing blue and it just did not work for me. Before I do any painting, even a small one like this, I will do those quick color studies. They don't need to be nice and fancy, just a quick throw it on a piece of paper, make sure the colors look good, and then that way when I go on to my actual painting, I can feel confident. And from experience, it's hard to complete a painting if you're not vibing with the colors. It becomes a slog. Because paintings usually go through an ugly phase, that awkward teenage phase, the messy middle, you gotta like what you're working with if you want to push through. And so I took my block off of that incline and put it flat on my desk, and the reason is because I added the orange. Everything is still really wet, and I wanted it to be wet because some of that orange, like the duck's bill, is going to be under the water and kind of hard to see. So I did it flat using a thicker application of paint so that it didn't spread too much, but still had a softness to it. And now I'm using my size 8 round silver black velvet brush, and I'm just lifting some areas, some ripples. And so essentially at this point, I have the building blocks of the painting. So I did put it flat so that the feet of the duck wouldn't just go off the page, but it's now dried enough that I could put it back upright, and some of that orange bleeding is cool. I like that. I just didn't want it to have that uncontrolled look completely. Most of my work is usually done in the first wash, and this is where I set up the bones of my painting. So I'm not afraid to go dark at this stage. Watercolor does dry paler. My paper's pretty wet, and so when you go wet into wet, it will typically dry paler than if you're doing wet paint on dry paper. Now I'm doing a little bit of negative painting around my duck's butt, and that is to bring it into focus, the best way to bring out your focal point is to have high contrast in that area. And so having that be my lightest value and then going and eventually putting my darkest value next to it is going to help that pop, make it more convincing and bring it forward. Another thing I want to mention is my brush strokes are curved when I'm working around the duck. That's because it's creating ripples, and those ripples are going to be round. So even if I'm applying color, I want to use a curved brush stroke. If I'm lifting paint, I want to use a curved brush stroke. I do have a reference image off to the side that I have put in black and white and have isolated values. So I don't really see detail right now. I'm just seeing big blocks of shapes in white, gray, and black. And that keeps me from getting too bogged down in all of the delicate shading. Especially when working small like this, I don't want it to get too detailed and heavy. I want it to remain luminous. So, yep, work black and white and a lot of squinting. All right, and it was important that I let this painting dry naturally, so no blow dryer. And now I'm going in with a size 3 round brush. It is a Da Vinci Cosmotop Spin, and I'm applying just a thicker layer of that Aussie red gold to give dimension to the feet. And the paper's dry right now, so anything I do is going to stay in place. As I said earlier, white animals, white items, they're not perfectly white. They reflect the colors around them. And even if I saw other colors in my reference image, I want to keep this limited. So I pulled the color of the feet to be the reflection on the bottom of the duck, to give it shadow. And then of course adding some of the green because the green of the water would reflect. And this part actually took me quite a bit of effort and believability. Because I was definitely hitting a spot where I was like, am I doing this right? What am I doing? But then I would tell myself, well, trust the process, just finish it. And another tip I have is, and I don't know why this works, but if you're looking at your painting and you're not sure what to do with it or if it even looks right, I mean, one thing you can do is just step away. But I found that looking at it through a camera actually helps me better assess if things are going right or not. And I don't know why that is, and I've heard that from other people too, because it's the same thing, but just looking through a camera lens can better indicate what I need to change, if I even need to change it. And also notice the way that I put the shadow on the bottom of the duck, I was following curved strokes and keeping it fairly, I mean, at this it's an angle, wrapping, following the forms of feathers. And when it comes to painting convincing ripples, and this is hard for me. Now, right now I'm painting around portions of the duck to bring it forward in space using negative painting, one of my favorite ways to paint. When it comes to painting ripples at this stage, I'm going to need to keep a lot of hard lines. When you look at a picture of ripples, you can see a definite light and dark. They don't fade into each other. And as someone who loves soft edges, doing these hard edges and leaving them unblended is really difficult for me, which is probably why I usually avoid painting water. But if you want your ripples to be convincing, leave hard edges and don't be afraid to go dark. And I have sped this video up. It is playing at about 150%, so my brush is actually moving slower in real time. And I end up having to adjust as I go. I'll put down a layer and a ripple, and as it dries, it might become too pale, and then I have to go into it again. Just be careful with your water control when you do that, because you don't want to lift the previous layer in that case. Just a little side note, I love how the head of the duck looks under the water. And that's a little bit of like what is that, refraction of water, where when something's underwater, its actual location is not how we perceive it. And so, like, the head of the duck and the way the neck connects looks kind of strange, but that is how it is in the photo, because the bottom of the duck is where we would see it without that refraction. And the head of the duck, however, is underwater, so its actual location is not how we would perceive it. I hope I'm using the right word, but since I'm in the middle of recording, I can't look that up. But at this point, I'm putting in even tiny ripples. Even though this is a loose painting, it's not going to be meticulously planned. I don't have every ripple going to go in, but I still want it to be believable. I still want, if someone looks at this painting, to be like, oh yeah, that's totally a duck, and nothing looks off. Because sometimes that can happen in art where, like, you've got something and everything seems to be in the right place, but something's just off. Although at this point, there really isn't much more to say. I've got the basics of the painting down. It's just bits of maybe lifting out a highlight of a ripple, going in and putting a darker value down. I do go in and try to add gouache to bring some more of that white out, but the shading that I did on the duck, because I reflected the colors around it, are very warm, and this gouache, even though it's white, reads cooler. And so for the most part, when I was using it to try and accent some feathers or alter the outer shape of the duck, it wasn't working for me. So I did it in a few areas, but it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And all of that has to do with the color temperature. And gouache it's opaque, but it can have a bit of transparency to it. Like, when you apply it, some of those colors underneath will show through if it's a thin layer. But the temperature wasn't doing it for me. So I decided that I needed to push the value of the underside of my duck. And at this point, there was a lot of squinting involved, where I would be nervous to add more, because it's a white duck. And if I add so much paint that it becomes a mid-tone value, then it won't stand against the pond around it. But I was hitting a point where I knew I wasn't happy, so I had to do something. And trusting the process like this, it's easy to say, it's harder to do, and just takes time. Since I've been painting for a long time, I've gotten to know my materials really well, can better trust getting through that discouraging phase. Now, one thing you can do to bring the white back is to use a scrubber brush. Now, in that point, I didn't use an actual scrubber brush, I just used a filbert brush that was small with stiffer bristles, and it was synthetic. And usually that works well enough. All right, I did that thing where I took a moment to just take a step back and look at my work, and then I got really excited and started painting again without pressing the record button. But all I did was add darker values to ripples, and I'm keeping things hard. And I'm really going around the duck. Now, I'm not completely outlining it, but I am putting the darkest value I can against the duck to create greater contrast. Yeah, sometimes that happens. I just get too excited to paint, which is a good sign. It's a sign that I'm onto something. And even if no one else likes it, as long as I feel that excitement while I paint, then it's a successful painting. Not everything needs to be frame-worthy. Not everything needs to go to a gallery. Not everything needs to go on social media. What I need is a feeling. And hopefully you feel it too. And here's the finished painting. So if you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like this. And if you want to see more, subscribe, because I post videos every Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!